Welcome, everyone, to what will be, I think, an absolutely fabulous discussion and a fabulous lecture by Professor Ronit Yershai. I want to thank Ann Moniz from the Center for the Study of World Religions and Ann Browdy from the Women's Studies and Religion program for co-sponsoring the event and helping to bring Professor Yershai to us. But most of all, I want to welcome Ronit Yershai back to Harvard, back to the Harvard Divinity School. She was here in 2000, 2008 as a fellow in the Women's Studies and Religion program, and we got to know her a little bit and came to appreciate so very, very much Ronit's warmth, her very deep humanity, her commitment to feminism and to human well-being, her sharp intelligence, and her extensive learning in Jewish law and philosophy. She's a wonderful person as well as a remarkable scholar, and it's wonderful to have you back, Ronit. Professor Yershai is visiting us from Israel, where she currently teaches in the Gender Studies program at Bar Ilan University, I think the only gender studies program with a doctorate in Israel. And she's also has a concurrent appointment as a research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. Her research focuses on gender and Jewish law, halakha, philosophy of halakha, bioethics, and feminist jurisprudence and its relation to Jewish law. She's published over a dozen articles on topics in halakhic thinking, including gender bias, but also, the dignity, honor, and equality in contemporary halakhic thinking, I think due in part at least to the entrance of women into that field. Also gender and human rights, and on very specific topics such as family planning, abortion, fertility, and most recently has been working on rape. She's highly sought after as an international speaker and lecturer. And in fact, she's in the United States right now because she was at a Congress in New York. So let me just mention a few titles to give you a sense of her current work. One is Egg Donation in Jewish and Israeli Law and Regulation of the New Family, Judaism, Gender, and Human Rights, The Case of Orthodox Feminism, The Crime of Rape in Jewish Law, Who is the Real Mother? Surrogacy and IVF Mothers in Jewish Law, and Beyond the Letter of the Law, When Halakha Fails to Include Goodness. In 2012, Brandeis University published her remarkable book. Here it is, which you've seen on all the posters. Okay, Fertility and Jewish Law, Feminist Perspectives on Orthodox Responsa Literature. This is also the title of her lecture today, and we look forward very much to hearing what you have to say, because we will all learn a great deal, I'm sure. So welcome, Ronit.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm really very excited to be here. It's a great honor and pleasure for me. And as I told you, Karen, when I come back to Harvard, I really feel like at home. It's a wonderful place. And I really want to thank Professor Ann Browdy, Ann, and Karen and Alexis for organizing this event. And I really hope that you enjoyed the lecture. And thank you very much all. It was wonderful. Okay. So, well, I forgot that I need this. Okay. So my aim in this lecture is to introduce you to the subject matter and the major conclusions of my book. But strange as it may sound, the truth is that it was only once I had finished writing it that I realized fully what I wanted to say. The title of the book is Fertility and Jewish Law, which is halakha, from a feminist perspective, but it is not clear at all at first glance that putting it this way can say anything that is really new or important to the field of modern halakha, since the issue of fertility is very old and feminist critique is very new. To put them together might sound surprising, random, trivial, or even boring, since it is clear that patriarchal law systems cannot meet the requirements of feminist scholarship. So had I been asked whether this book is about the halachic stance on abortion, family planning, or fertility treatment, the correct answer would be yes, but also no. So what is it that I have attempted to do here, and what are my main conclusions? What does a gendered perspective contribute to the field of modern halakha? In order to answer this question, I would like to open with a quote from Rabbi Isaac Arama, a Jewish scholar and biblical exegete of the 16th century from the generation after the Spanish expulsion. And I quote, "The two names, woman, in Hebrew Isha, and Eve, in Hebrew Chava, indicate two purposes. The first teaches that woman was taken from man, stressing that like him she can understand and advance in the intellectual and moral fields, just as did the matriarchs and many righteous women and prophetesses, and as the literal meaning of Proverbs 31 about the woman of worth, Eshet Chayil in Hebrew, indicates. The second alludes to the power of childbearing and childrearing, as is indicated by the name Eve, Chava, the mother of all living. A woman deprived of the power of childbearing will be deprived of this secondary purpose and will be left with the ability to do evil or good, like a barren." End of quote. Arama's words are unusual, even in light of modern Jewish sensibilities, not only because he equates a woman to a man in terms of her intellectual abilities and her desire to develop and to be a person of the world, or as the philosophers like to say, to be a subject, but also because he believes that the goal of fertility indicated by the first woman's name, Chava, Eve, is not women's ultimate goal in life. So returning now to the question of my research, I'm able to state that I wasn't necessarily interested in the halachic stance on fertility, but rather the halachic attitudes about the essence, roles, and life goals of woman given her function in human reproduction. Do modern halachic decisors consider women more as woman or more as Eve? And I want to emphasize that I was more interested in modern halakha, since it is reasonably clear to everyone that the primary texts of halakha were created in a patriarchal framework and culture in which women were not considered subjects. Therefore, feminist critique of the Mishnah, the Talmud, or the responsa literature before the modern era, while important, appears to be relatively trivial at this point in time. Well, thanks to the work of feminists before me, of course. But what does seem interesting is to understand how modern halakhic decisors, who are committed to the canonical text of Judaism, yet are living in a framework in which woman, as they know her, is a different creature than the one the sages knew, make decisions. As a rabbi once said to me, "Women today have driver's license, credit cards, and academic degrees. How can we claim that they are under their father's or under their husband's control?" In other words, I ask, what are the exegetical mechanisms which enable modern-day halachic decisors to change halakha? And do they indeed make use of all the halachic tools available to them in order to interpret halakha in a way that suits modern reality, or do they choose a different path? The commandment to be fruitful and multiply occupies a place at the top of the Jewish hierarchy of values, so much so that anyone who refrains from engaging in it is considered a spiller of blood. However, from the formal halachic perspective, this duty is considered obligatory only for men, while women, of course, carry most of the burdens of gestation and childcare. In terms of the religious obligation, men are biblically required to have at least one boy and one girl, but there is, in addition, a rabbinic obligation for him to have as many children as he can. By halachic convention, there is an obligation to have children immediately upon getting married, and not to wait until a couple finishes studying, becomes more economically stable, etc. This perspective leads to an understanding that there is a prohibition on using contraceptives until the man has fulfilled his biblical obligation to have a son and a daughter, after which contraceptives will be permitted in some cases, since the rabbinical requirement to continue having children still stands. Women, though not obligated in the commandment of reproduction, apparently pay the biggest price in its fulfillment, as the main brunt of child raising falls on them. And when couples marry young, it is usually she who does not finish her studies, develop her career, and establish herself financially, leaving her largely dependent on her husband. The right to control fertility has always been one of the main targets of feminist activism. Feminist positions attribute women's continued social inferiority to their responsibility for child rearing, the majority of which falls upon them. Feminists also note that the task of bearing children, with its biological emphasis, and of raising them, reinforce and preserve dualistic gender distinctions. Thus, women are destined to remain in the private and material spheres, as opposed to the public and spiritual spheres. The more women are directed towards bearing and raising children, the more strongly the above distinctions preserved, along with women's positioning at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Is it at all possible to make peace between two such contradictory worldviews? Is it trivial that we cannot do so? This is one of the central conflicts this book discusses. In the first two chapters, I demonstrate that while procreation is indeed an important and solid value in the Jewish tradition, halachic decisors have attempted throughout history to balance it with other values. True, this is always done from the male perspective, since the obligation to bear children is placed upon him, and because he is also required to learn Torah and to provide for his family. Therefore, throughout the ages, the obligation to have children was always balanced with other obligations and never exceeded a man's capabilities. In my book, I bring numerous examples from halachic literature demonstrating that halachic interpretive methods were found in order to balance the fertility obligation such that it would not interfere with other duties and values. This means that modern halachic authorities have tools with which to address the new reality for women, in which they learn and develop careers and balance the different interests and values of our days. All they need to do is apply the constructs and considerations which were previously used for the male perspective for the benefit of women. That's all. From the legal exegetical perspective, this is very easy. But do they actually do it? It turns out that not only do they not, but to the contrary. There is a particularly strong rhetoric put into play to ensure that women remain at home raising children. Here are a few salient examples. Rabbi Shlomo Aviner, one of the most influential and prominent rabbis in certain circles in Israel, writes that one must not discount the importance of fertility, and I quote, "A man can never decide that he has had enough boys and girls, since he is commanded, and at the evening withhold not your hand." It is true that rabbis were divided in their opinions on the severity of this obligation, but in either case, whether one is more or less stringent, there is a rabbinical obligation. And this is the Maimonides wording of the obligation. As long as there is strength, it is a mitzvah, a commandment to increase God's image. End of quote. Though this quote is a halachic passage, this analysis, as I demonstrate at length in the book, is not a necessary one. And other halachic conclusions are possible regarding questions of number of children, delay of first pregnancy, and spacing between birth. Rabbi Aviner understands this. He understands this, and apparently understands that formal halachic language is not enough, since he is living in a modern reality in which women no longer see themselves solely as mothers and raisers of children. This being the case, there is need for much stronger theological rhetoric in order to keep them at home, and therefore he pens the following, and I quote again. Yes, I will be a professor. My husband is completing his doctorate in physics. I am not jealous of him, but I will be a professor. I feel that I have the power for this. I want degrees and a career. I will be a professor. I will succeed, and my students will respect me. I want equality. This is not my suggestion. It is God who created men and women as equals. We are both in his image. I have a pure soul, and I believe in myself. I am definitely different than my husband, but not less than him. I will be a professor. This is a dream I have, and I have had since high school. I am determined to fulfill it, and I even know in what I want to gain my professorship. I want to be a professor of education, a professor of the education of my children, with many degrees, a degree in femininity, a degree in marriage, a degree in motherhood. Why do you smile? I quote, why do you smile? This is not a joke. My husband produces the electrical components of some important instruments, and I will produce children. I will produce souls. So why do you laugh? Is this less important? No, it is much more important. I will be a professor of my children's education. Motherhood is a professorship and a sacred undertaking. It is a massive project, and my kingdom is the home. I will be a professor of the home. End of quote. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. From a formal halachic standpoint, one can join forces with the feminist revolution's demand to see women not only as objects of fertility and motherhood, but also as subjects who wish to realize their full human potential. But hegemonic halachic trends actually utilize an anti-formalistic process, one which might be termed theological, ideological, in order to nevertheless justify a patriarchal and conservative worldview. In other words, modern halakha is much more conservative and stringent than it was in previous generations. And it fails to realize the flexibility which exists in the halakhic framework of on these topics. There are, of course, other reasons for this pronatal tendency, such as the Holocaust or even the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But my claim is that it is impossible to emphasize the fertility obligation so strongly without significantly constructing women as essentially existing for the sake of fertility and motherhood. The two are obviously linked. In other words, I posit that those gender perceptions which construct women's primary role as mothers serve the pronatal ideology and have dramatic consequences for the ways in which women are able to define themselves as subjects beyond their reproductive functions. This situation is particularly interesting today when we have effective birth control options available. So without getting into too much detail, since I want you to read the book, the pill would be the preferred halachic option, followed by intrauterine devices, whereas using a condom is strictly forbidden. I mean, according to the rabbis. I don't think so, but my first two chapters demonstrate that the options at play in early halakha enable much more flexible interpretations than those accepted today, and that if modern halachic decisors wanted to accommodate women, they have the tools with which to do so. Yet only a small minority of the rabbis are making use of these exegetical options, those in favor of the feminist revolution, and I can count them maybe on two hands. Okay, so all of what I have said thus far is true regarding abortion, upon which I focus in chapters 3 and 4 of the book. My main thesis regarding abortion is that halachic stances, which were relatively marginal in the Talmudic tradition and the classical responsa literature, literature became central in modern rulings, particularly those of the 20th century, as part of the growing trend toward stringent interpretation, which grew primarily as a reaction to new perceptions of gender. Thus, for example, in my opinion, the most plausible reading of the rabbinic sources indicates that a fetus does not have the status of person under Jewish law. This is the view that emerges from the Mishnah regarding a fetus whose birth threatens the mother's life, which I believe accords with the Talmud and with long series of interpretations by both earlier and later halachic authorities. Even Maimonides' analogy of the fetus as a pursuer in the case of a threat to the mother's life does not, I believe, necessitate attributing personhood to it, and this understanding is supported by the majority of those authorities, and I check them all. The dominant position throughout the ages had been the lenient one, according to which the fetus is not a person, and there is consequently no sweeping biblical ban against abortion. There has been somewhat a reversal of this trend in the 20th century, with an escalating tendency to adopt the stringent approach and to view the prohibition of abortion as being directly ordained by the Torah. I posit that this stringent stance adopted in the 20th century is directly linked to the legalization of abortion and to the opposition to the women's movement, as well as to the fact that Christianity is extremely stringent on this matter. Thus, for example, when Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, which was a great rabbi, he lived here in the United States, he was a great rabbi for the entire Jewish world, when he first voiced his views on abortion while still in Russia in the 1930s, the context was its legalization in the newborn Soviet Union, which became the first country in the world to allow free and legal abortion. This is also the context in which one can read Rabbi Yonah Zweig's stringent opinion on the matter. Rabbi Zweig, who was the chief rabbi of Switzerland, explicitly writes that the Jewish stance on abortion should not be more lenient than that of the Catholic Church. In his opinion, such a situation would constitute a real desecration of God. But my argument goes beyond that. Most recently, halachic decisors have become increasingly aware of issues relating to fetal abnormalities. Their permission to abort in such cases and in cases of danger to the mother's health is based on the determination that the fetus is not a person. One might think that this determination would justify abortion on other grounds as well, but at least in published decisions, as opposed to oral responses given in individual cases, this has not been the case. For example, Rabbi Moshe Tzuriel summarizes the prevalent halachic opinions on this matter as follows, and I quote, "It is clear that it is not permitted to abort a healthy fetus when there is no danger to the mother's life. Any other justification for abortion, financial consideration, a wish not to hinder the woman's career," and the quotation marks is in the original, or to preserve an attractive appearance, crowded living conditions, etc., is unacceptable. In this article, we are concerned only with the abortion of a fetus known in advance to have a serious mental or physical defect. End of quote. Rabbi Tzuriel goes on to present a very lenient position, stating that the fetus does not have the status of a person and quoting a series of halachic decisors who permits abortion even when there is no danger to the mother. I maintain that if the fetus is not a person, it is implausible, at least analytically, to differentiate in principle between abortion on the grounds of physical or mental defects and abortion on the basis of needs unconnected to the fetus itself. What is the categorical difference between the two cases? One possible response is that there is some guiding principle by which abortions that go against the value of the sanctity of human life may be distinguished from those that do not. But is that value really more challenged by abortion of a fetus whose birth might harm his mother's dignity or life plan than by that of a defective fetus? And what about the value of preserving a woman's esteem and her ability to manage her life in a way that conforms to her intellectual, professional, and emotional needs? What we basically see here is that even those decisors who believe that abortion is permitted on rabbinic, is prohibited on rabbinic rather than biblical grounds, which means that it is more lenient prohibition, discuss it mainly either from the perspective of the fetus or in reference to threats to the woman's health. According to one rabbi, no child is unwanted after 5 years. This quote is from Rabbi Immanuel Jakubowicz, who used to be the chief rabbi of Great Britain. So no child is unwanted after 5 years. What lies behind a remark like this? To my mind, it expresses the view that women, by nature, want children, that their primary function and goal is to have them, and that even if a woman declares that she absolutely cannot have another child because, for example, it might ruin her life plan or her professional aspirations, just don't believe her. Okay, so if I am to summarize my process thus far, I have demonstrated that modern hegemonic halachic trends betray a clear bias. Whenever the question asked pertains to sex without fertility, the tendency is to be stringent. All of this despite the fact that from a basic legal standpoint, this tendency is not at all necessary, and in my opinion is ideologically based, coming primarily to counterbalance the progress to date in terms of women's rights to equality. So much for sex without fertility. As I will now demonstrate, in all questions relating to fertility without sex, that is to modern fertilization technologies, the tendency is to allow almost all procedures. The two trends are, of course, interlinked. If an ideology of fertility is what determines exegetical decisions, one must understand this ideology within the gender framework which constructs women's central role as based in their reproductive functions, and thus attempt to attach them to the domestic sphere and perpetuate the existing patriarchal social order. Alongside this, I suggest that in rabbinic literature and early halacha, there are significant alternative exegeses of the texts which, if used by modern halachic decisors, could create a halachic discourse that is much more respectful of women. A discourse like this is beginning to be produced in those religious circles in which women's position in society is increasingly perceived as equal to that of men, a fact emphasizing even further the ideological slant hidden in the hegemonic halachic story regarding fertility. Unlike family planning and abortion, the question of artificial insemination is a relatively new one, about a century old. And the early sources from which interpretive tools can be extracted in order to reach a halachic stance are limited. This makes the values governing the halachic deliberations on this issue more transparent. As noted, on the issue of artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization, and surrogacy, one finds the emergence of an extremely permissive halachic standpoint, extremely. pronatalism demonstrated to be the underlying principle governing the prohibition against birth control and abortion emerges more powerfully here. The halachic viewpoint allows a woman to be artificially impregnated with almost any sperm and to carry almost any pregnancy without addressing the concomitant moral issues. Against the background of wide exploration in bioethical and feminist literature, the absence of profound consideration of the ethical aspects from halachic deliberations is striking. Seemingly, any medical advances in fertility are uncritically received and permitted without consideration of their associated ethical dimensions. The sole aspect of deliberation is the identification of the halachic path that will permit these procedures to be carried out, not the question of whether permitting the innovation is morally correct. The main problem which concern halachic rulers in this context are: can artificial insemination using the husband's semen be considered a fulfillment of the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, since this is not the natural way of doing this? Does the use of donor sperm constitute adultery? Is there no concern of incest for the future generation born from artificial insemination? As for the answers, most halachic authorities believe that insemination using the husband's semen can be considered a fulfillment of the commandment, and even though it is done in an unnatural manner, and it is therefore not tied in with a prohibition on destroying semen, they believe that donor sperm is not considered adulterous, since for adultery to take place, the actual sexual act must take place. Hence, the transferring of outside semen to a woman belonging to a certain man is not problematic. Regarding the question of incest between the future children, this problem was a major concern for halachic authorities, since theoretically a brother could end up marrying his sister from a sperm donation. However, this problem can be addressed either by having sperm donation listed, thereby allowing donations from Jews as well, or by allowing donations only from non-Jews, which is not a problem at all, at least according to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, whom you remember was so forbidden about abortion. As opposed to artificial insemination, surrogacy is an entirely new halachic realm, and it is impossible to point to even one single agreed-upon source among the poskim, the halachic decisors, as providing a basis for deriving a stand on this issue. Nonetheless, most halachic authorities see no halachic barriers to surrogacy. The halachic discussion of this issue centers on the question of whether maternity is determined by donation of genetic material or gestation, and ignores the plethora of questions addressed in feminist literature. For example, does surrogacy possess features of baby trade and manipulation of women from the lower classes? What is the difference between selling sex and selling fertility? Is there any substance to the comparison between surrogacy and prostitution? The halachic authorities take no position on this ethical question, not at all. What explains the tendency in halachic deliberations to reduce such complex issues to the question of who is the mother, and all but ignore the broader moral aspects? How is it possible that all the halachic energy and wisdom are directed at identifying the halachic analogy that proves whether genetic material or parturition determine maternity? In my view, two factors combine to explain this perplexing situation. First of all, the identifiable trend of pronatalism, and secondly, a gender bias that restricts women to their reproductive role. Although halachists are certainly entitled to view the importance of the commandment to have children as outweighing even prominent ethical considerations, I argue that such a strong position is only possible because of the underlying gender conception of woman as Eve, as Chava. When women are viewed only as vehicles for fulfilling the commandment of be fruitful and multiply, alternative exegetical approaches that could support a more balanced approach are summarily dismissed. Thus far, we have addressed the halachic materials themselves and the particular conclusions I have reached. I believe that these conclusions are important in and of themselves, but as I said at the outset, the truth is that it was only after I finished writing the book that I began to realize the larger picture to which this type of research belongs. There are those who believe that Jewish studies are undergoing an extremely significant shift in the last 2 decades, or maybe 3 decades. Kirschenblatt-Gimbel called it the corporeal turn in Jewish studies. While traditional research paid almost no attention to topics such as sexuality, body, and fertility, exploration of these topics within the field became more intensive as the development of culture and gender studies speeded into Jewish studies. When I began writing this book, I didn't realize that I was taking part in a paradigm shift in research. In any event, this shift is producing new and important knowledge in the field of Jewish studies. However, the paradigm has shifted primarily in the realm of the study of rabbinic literature, as seen in studies by Daniel Buyarin, David Bialé, Charlotte von Robert, Michael Satlow, Ishai Rosenzweig, and many others. It is, however, only just beginning in the study of modern Jewish law, modern halakha. I'm happy to contribute to it since I believe it is one of the most important areas of Jewish studies, both because it raises topics that until now have been kept quiet, and one must hope that undoing this silence in research will also lead to critical discourse among the halakha observing public, and because addressing issues of body and sexuality presents a fascinating picture of how halachic authorities navigate the legal corpus while views about women undergo significant changes, and how we must understand the links between social perceptions and halachic legal activity. Another point which became fully clear to me only after I completed the book was that it plays a part in an important postmodern shift, a postmodern shift as well, the shift from the necessary to the contingent. The importance of this transition becomes clear when one reads the works of Foucault, Rorty, and others. While it is true that I wrote about this in the final chapter of the book, I did not imagine that such a work, which traces the genealogy of halakha while noting gender perceptions, and by doing so saying that this construct is not necessary at all, we can find other options how to do halakha, would constitute such a deep challenge to the authority and hegemony of halakha. In legal philosophy, this shift is characterized by the shift from legal formalism to legal realism. In gender studies, by a challenge to essentialist perceptions of women. In this context, I would paint the feminist project of modern halachic inquiry as the production of halachic genealogies which will not only expose the fact that hegemonic halachic notions are not the only valid halachic ones, and similarly exposed are the gender perceptions inherent in them, thereby leaving the job of deciding whether to accept the gendered worldview constructed by these works or not up to the public. Of course, this challenge raised by studies such as this book produced complicated objections by the religious establishment. One of the common critiques is the claim that these studies accept the feminist worldview uncritically as an absolute truth, while viewing halakha, or Judaism in general, as a flexible tool which must align itself with new egalitarian norms. Others argue that feminism is a discourse of rights, while Judaism is one of duties. Of course, this kind of criticism has already given me ideas for a few more articles. And thus I have understood that this type of project, which demonstrates how halachic rulings are not always the only viable ones, fits in well with the work of critical legal theorists and legal feminists. Legal feminism has attempted to demonstrate that legal doctrines that are perceived as essentially neutral are, in fact, very particularly masculine. I believe this book takes one step further. It demonstrates that halachic doctrines are actually extremely flexible, although their initial flexibility, of course, was directed at males, and that one can most certainly, without undue exegetical legal effort, produce halachic rulings fostering much more respectful perceptions of women as subject than prevalent today. Unfortunately, it is not that modern halachic authorities today lack the halachic tools to make these kinds of rulings, but rather that they lack the will to use those tools. In other words, we are dealing with a conflict between two agendas, laden with value statements and judgments, and not with a dispute between different formal legal perceptions. The more feminist research demonstrates this fact, the more feminist researchers undertake such work, and today more than ever they are capable of doing so, since the world of Jewish halachic writing is no longer the unique domain of men, the more we will be able to posit a competing halachic narrative to that of the religious establishment. At the end of the day, the dispute is really about values, not about whether the halakha can contain those values. The public, as I said before, will have to make the final call on that question. Thank you very much.
Found out if there is either halakhic or rabbinical opinion on artificial insemination for kohanim.
Oh. Actually, the problem is like there is no problem. First of all, kohanim, like any other man, can do artificial insemination. But there was a very, very interesting case in Israel. You know that now they have the technology of, how do you call it, PGD or something that for you can select the sex of the fetus, yes, of the embryo. But it is forbidden unless it is something very special. And in Israel, you need a special committee in the Ministry of Health in order to permit this, okay? So there was a very interesting case that a Kohen and his wife, they wanted a baby girl, which is unique. Yes, most of people want boys, unfortunately. But so he wanted a baby girl. Why? Because if they have a boy at the age of 13, Kohanim, according to Jewish rituals, they're doing the blessing to the audience. But if this boy is coming from artificial insemination, so he's not from his sperm, he's not biologically his, so he won't be able to do this blessing with him. So the audience, the people will know that he is not his biological son. So they asked for a special permission to make a baby girl. But that's the only thing that I know about Kohanim, which is special here.
So was they allowed?
Yes, of course. I mean, why not?
So basically, by the fact that they were not going to be able to make the blessing for at the age of 13.
Yeah, because they're not Kohanim, because they're not. Kohen is a biological. Okay.
What if the sperm they got was kohanim?
Okay. So if the sperm is from a Kohen, obviously you can do that. But
If the father in the family is not kohanim, and the sperm they got is kohanim.
Oh, well. So listen. Listen, so first of all, I have to say that what a Kohen is. Oh, Kohen is Kohen is a priest. I mean, but today we don't have the temple in Jerusalem, and we don't have a priest and the sacrificing animals, thank God. And I've decided to be a vegetarian, but today, because of Karen, no, it's okay. So priests, so today the only thing that was left from this priesthood is that the people who are belonging to this kind of, I mean, families that are priests, and they know that they are priests, so the only thing that they're entitled to do, they have to do during the service on Saturday morning, or not only on Saturday, only during the service, they bless the audience. Only men can do that. There are no priests, no women priests. Okay, so the issue is that according to at least to the first generation of the halachic decisors on this topic, they forbade artificial insemination from Jews, because of the fear of incest in the second generation. Okay, that maybe a brother will marry sister from the same sperm, and they won't know about that. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein permitted use Gentile sperm, because no matter because of what. I mean, it's too complicated to explain, but according to the Jewish law, as a Gentile sperm, I mean, there is no. Okay, never mind. Leave it like this, okay? You're so interesting about that. There is no affiliation for a Gentile according to his sperm. I mean, if a Gentile have a son, halachically, he's not his son. Something like this, okay? So the affiliations are not, biologically, they're not considered legally. Okay, so if a Gentile donate a sperm, it's not a problem, since even though it might be that a brother would marry, his sister from the same sperm, technically legally they're not considered as brother and sister, so it's not problematic. Okay.
Legal incest, not genetic incest.
Exactly. I mean, genetically it's a problem, of course, but legally. Legally, yep, exactly, yeah. Lexi, yeah.
Is the same true for talking about the Jewish identity passing down through the matrilineal line when you're talking about either a surrogate or an egg donor? If a Gentile acts as the egg donor or the surrogate?
So this is the picture. So this question of who is the mother, of course, has to do with this question of being Jewish. I mean, so because there is a big dispute about who is the mother, the woman who give the egg donation or the woman who give birth, so they're taking all disputes together, and they say if a Gentile woman give the egg donation, the baby who is going to be born will have to be converted to Judaism, and if the woman who is giving birth is Gentile and the woman who invited the fetus is Jewish, so again the baby should be converted to Judaism. But this is just stringency, because most of the halachic decisors say that the woman who gives birth is the Jewish mother. I mean, is the mother, not the Jewish mother. So if she is not Jewish, the baby should be converted. But if she is Jewish, nevertheless, the egg donation was from a non-Jewish, they shouldn't convert the child. But most of the rabbis, they just want to be okay with all the methods. So, there will be a conversion at any case. Okay.
So did I understand correctly? The decision is that since there isn't sexual intercourse, there isn't infidelity, so there's no concern about mamzerim?
That's right. No concern about mamzerim at all. Yeah, that's right. Because for adultery to take place, to occur, the vast majority of the decisors say that they have to have a sexual relation and not just sperm donation or whatever. Yes.
This may be a very basic question, but I was wondering, like, how much legal and biology knowledge rabbis had.
Okay, so I mean, previous generation, some of them knew they were familiar with the biological knowledge of their time. Today, it's very much different, because in these issues especially of fertility issues, they are really experts. Sorry, in Israel, we have a very interesting organization. It calls PUA, PUA was midwife in the Bible. Yeah, so. The name, of course, is interesting, but they sit together. The rabbis sit together. I mean, they have very strong connection to to physicians, biologists, gynecologists, whatever, and they just they became expert in these issues. So they have a very wide knowledge in these issues. Yes, yes. It's not always for the good of the woman, I must tell you. I'm very critical about this organization, because the pressure in Israel to have children is so strong. You know that Israel is the first in the world per capita in fertility treatment. First in the world. The government gives a woman endless cycles of fertility treatments until she has at least two children. So, it's a big. There is a big dispute in Israel about this, because we don't have so much money, you know. but the pronatal tendency and the ideology of be fruitful and multiply is so invested, not only in Judaism, but in the Israeli culture as well. So it's like, you know, you can't touch this issue at all.
I wanted to ask, sort of putting that together with what you were saying earlier about on whom the commandment falls. So a woman is given endless fertility treatments until she has had 2 children, regardless of whether her husband already has a son and a daughter? So if she's someone's second wife, right? So if the man has fulfilled his commandment,
Yeah.
the woman is still entitled to under the medical system.
Interesting.
And
I mean, they are divorced, and maybe he has children from another woman. Okay.
So she's the
Interesting.
second wife, say, either because of a divorce or because
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
a
yeah,
widower.
I understand.
He has a son and a daughter.
Yeah.
Is she remains entitled to the endless fertility treatments?
I believe I'm not sure about that from a legal point of view. I'm not sure about that, but I think yes, that if she is barren, she is entitled to this. I mean barren. I mean if she doesn't have children yet.
And it's not attached to her marital status. Could an unmarried woman
Unmarried woman.
or a lesbian or
I think yes, but I'm not sure about that. I think yes. But see, that's a good point, because unmarried woman or lesbian, this is very interesting. Of course, halachic authorities, they don't like lesbian and gays, yes. But I mean, although lesbianism in Judaism is not really a problem, yes. But look what's going on here. Since they're so permissive about artificial insemination, so, I mean, a single woman, no matter if she's lesbian or just not married, and she wants children, from a legal Jewish point of view, from purely halachic point of view, there is no problem at all that she would go through artificial insemination, because the question of adultery is not, of course, relevant here. So it's not a problem at all. So they're so permissive, but in the back door, they permitted actually they open the door to a change of the structure of the Jewish family, which is a real subject. Yes, a real subject.
I may have misunderstood, but
Okay.
is it, and I know this is cutting whatever, but is it possible for the sperm and the egg donor to both be Gentile and the surrogate to be Jewish?
Yep.
And yet, because the birth mother is Jewish, the child is Jewish.
Yeah.
Does that in some sense then impact the notion in any way of the materiality, or, I mean, is there, do you see is that the genetic continuity, in this, or the question of what it means to be Jewish, or?
I mean, so long.
I mean, I assume that's legally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, but not on legally, but even theologically. So long a man or a woman can convert to Judaism. So what's the difference, I mean, between this and... although I must admit, if to be honest, that at the first generation of these issues, I mean, of artificial insemination, there were some rabbis who really, they thought that putting a Gentile semen within a Jewish woman body is crazy. I mean, it was, like, I heard their racist, notions. But I must admit that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, for example, and other rabbis, they dismissed this. Not because of they're so anti-racist, but because legally, halachically, they thought it's permissible, and that's it.
Would the question then not be that there is basically no difference in status between the child of Gentile sperm and ova with a Jewish mother and just a Gentile child?
A Gentile child who converted to Judaism?
Yeah, they would both convert. That the status would be so there would really be no
No
reason to
difference.
have a Jewish surrogate.
No difference at all, as far as I know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the society would treat them, but from a formal legal halachic standpoint, no matter at all.
I guess the underlying issue that's there for me is the question of whether there's a separation between the genetic material and the body that gives life at birth, because that strikes me as it would for Christian understandings, would be fairly radical to separate those.
To separate, what do you mean by that? To separate, I mean, to say that the genetic is different from the...
The ancient biology was that the male sperm is the one that gives life and gives form, and the female is what gives substance.
Yeah, the limb.
Yeah, and there's a big debate then, Brazilian versus other kinds of, in the ancient medical literature about does the female also contribute material to form as well? And that led to the problem of the fact that if the woman, her sperm, could contribute form and life, and she gives the nourishing substance, that she didn't need men. She had everything, And they talked about the fact you get these little, women would have these carbuncles or something, and that those were basically babies.
Oh, okay.
And then they thought this happened.
Okay.
But what they couldn't do was suggest that that the woman gives, it would move us back to a position where the woman is not contributing any sperm at all, and that has never been part of ancient biological function.
But she gives birth.
It would make the woman just totally
Superfluous.
the oven in which the baking happened.
Yeah, okay. So what's the problem with this? I mean,
The problem with that is it would really redefine what it means to be the mother of a child
okay, I
in
see.
a very fundamental kind of way.
I see, I understand. So according to to the vast majority of halachic decisors, I mean, I would say like this: until recently, most of them thought that the woman who gives birth is the Jewish mother, and it's no matter about the sperm, about the egg donation, whatever. Now it's a bit changing because of medical knowledge, yes, that the genetic material is more important. And now, if I'm looking at the larger picture of the halachic decisors, I would say that now they're split, and many of them are thinking now that the egg donation is more important than the gestation. But in any case, they solve the problem. I mean, it's okay to do the procedure no matter what. Yeah.
Then I'll let this go, okay? But in sci-fi literature, in the future, nobody wants to gestate a baby, so they put the genetic material into birthing machines.
Okay.
And so it's a completely utilitarianization of a birthing body into a mechanized machine. And that kind of thinking, then that the surrogate is simply that kind of instrument
I agree upon that, though.
whose humanity
Of course.
is basically absent.
Of course. I agree with that, and that's why in the fourth chapter of the book, I brought really massive theories from bioethic and feminist writings about this issue, just to show, just to demonstrate that really halachic decisors should consider this problem of the surrogate mother. I know that now, at least in Israel, within the homosexual community, there is a big debate about surrogacy, and I know homosexual my fellows, yes, that they say we don't want to subjugate or subordinate other women in order us to have babies. So it's a big issue right now in this community of lesbian and gays, at least in Israel. Yep.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
But it's just to follow up on that. I mean, there are cases of Israeli men, homosexuals, who go to India.
Yeah, I know.
For the entire process.
Yes.
For, I think, in most cases, the donation, but definitely for the gestational aspect.
Of course.
And they do that because it's
still illegal in Israel. It's still, well, the legal situation is like this. Legal, not the halachic issue. The secular issue is that Israel was the first state in the world to legislate on this issue of surrogacy. It was in 1996. The first, it was the first state in the world. Now, and homosexuals were not allowed to do surrogacy in Israel, only married couples. Now, things have changed, and they want the law to acknowledge their. They want to do that. So now there was a special committee in Israel, and the law is, I don't know what's going to be at the end because of the religious parliament members, but it's going to be a big debate. But the recommendations of this committee is to allow homosexuals to do it in Israel, yes. Just a second, she wanted.
I just wanted to continue on that one.
Okay, please.
Sorry. So if, since marriage is allowed outside of Israel, like most of the people who are mixed marriages, they go to Cyprus and
That's
get married,
right.
and marriage after recognized.
That's right.
If a gay couple who is married in Cambridge
Yes.
goes to Israel,
Yeah.
are they married?
No. No, I don't think so. No. But man and a woman, yes. Yes. But still, same-sex marriage is not, it's not recognized in Israel.
Even though they have a gay certificate from City Hall of Yale?
No, because in Israel there is a unique situation. The religious law is the civil law. We have a big problems with this, yes, in matters of marriage and divorce in general, not only for homosexuals. I mean, for it's a big issue. And feminist organizations, which I'm familiar very much with them, and I'm an activist myself, have to fight the religious establishment a lot on these issues. Yes, because according to Jewish law, the woman is dependent in the husband in order to get divorced, and if he is not willing to give her, so it became a big problem. Yes.
I was wondering how it looks like in practice.
Sorry, I can't hear
Sorry,
you.
I was wondering how it looks like in practice of fertility clinics. So, are there different types of fertility clinics, like state organized or private?
No, they're all state organized, no private. They're all state organized. Yes, because we have health insurance. I mean, from the state. I mean, how do you call this? Yeah, health insurance. Yes, governmental health insurance. What? Universal healthcare. Something like this. So it's paid. It's paid by the government. So it's. Yes, absolutely yes. That's right.
Because what I'm thinking about, I'm from Belgium, and in Belgium, you have private fertility clinics, but then you also have university fertility clinics, which are divided according to ideological tendencies. So you have the Catholic University Fertility Clinic and the secular laïc University Clinic, and their protocols are very different.
No, that's not the situation, no. For good and worse, because it's Orthodox halacha that controls this. But in this regard, it's very permissive, so it's, there is no problem for couples who want to make fertility treatments, but there are problems, ethical problems that they're not being considered. That's my claim, basic claim, yes. And
well, I was just going to ask if the role of the rabbis and halakha in determining civil status, does that extend to all issues of fertility and health that you've been discussing? So,
what do you mean by that?
Does the religious law govern federal
Fertility.
policy regarding fertility?
Well, I won't say in 100%, but they have a very, very much, very big influence, because they're sitting in these committees. Because before preparing the law, the government is putting a committee in order to make the work. So in these committees, always you have rabbis who are sitting there, and they, because they are very connected to the medical establishment, so they're very much working together. When I wrote about egg donation, I really looked for the protocols of these committees about egg donation, because egg donation now, we have a new law in Israel, just from, I think, 2012. A year ago, or something like this, and the influence of the rabbis and the cooperation between the rabbis and the doctors was it's fabulous. But it's not one-to-one. Not always the committee accepts the religious opinion.
So what I was wondering about here is that this seems like, this is so challenging for the majority of Israelis who are not observing halakha, but are still governed by it.
No, but here the halakha is very permissive. So, yeah.
This is a case where the political agenda of increasing the Jewish population and the religious law
goes hand in
are
hand.
sympathetic.
That's
Are there any issues where the concerns of the secular government and the religious law are less?
Are less? Of course, in issues of marriage and divorce, for example, of course, here the Supreme Court is in a big tension with the Rabbinic Court, because according to the Israeli law, the Rabbinic Court is the law, but there are issues of civil rights For example, I don't know, a woman who was, how do you say, it, blackmailed by her husband in order him to give her a bill of divorce. So she appealed to the Supreme Court, and they have to, verdict an issue according to the laws of equality, dignity, or whatever, but it's not according to the rabbinic court. So there is a big tension here. And many organizations, especially feminist organizations, are working on this issue, yes. But since the government needs the religious politicians in order to make a coalition, we are stuck. That's the... Yeah, Lexi.
I have another tricky question.
Tricky, okay, I
So-
love really tricky questions.
So we talked about an unmarried woman
Yep.
who would be able to get treatments at a fertility clinic.
Yeah.
To have-
Which I told you, I'm not sure about that. I'm
Okay.
quite sure, but I'm not
Okay.
definitely sure about that, yeah.
So let's talk about a woman who couldn't get a get, who couldn't get divorced,
Yeah.
but she has a new partner who she's been with for
Oh,
a while.
this is a big problem because if she doesn't have a bill of divorce, it's adultery, and the children will be considered as mamzerim, as bastard. So that's the, yeah. So what's the?
So again, that was going to be my question. If she went there with, let's say, a man she's been living with for 5 years, and she,
Oh, if she's going to say this to the rabbinic court, she won't get a bill of divorce, never ever. Because yeah.
but let's say that her husband is never going to give her a get.
Oh, okay. So that's.
So she's living her life with
Say
someone.
she's a grass widow.
Yes, she a grass widow is a guna. Yeah. So yeah.
So the fertility clinics, if they pursued it at all, would find out that she's married to someone else and not allow.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Please.
Oh, sorry. So I have two questions. First, how do all these laws about fertility and treatments affect non-Jewish women living in Israel? Right, because I would assume that the pronatal desires are less strong if you're not Jewish.
Yeah, but you know, if this is the Israeli law, so all Israeli citizens are entitled to this. So also Palestinian citizens, I don't know, other cultural minorities or whatever are entitled to get this, of course. Yes, I can imagine that not, yes. Yes, I'm quite sure that yes.
It's just that the Palestinian population is in a different position vis-a-vis the demographic transition.
Yeah.
And they're still producing relatively more children,
Yeah.
although some of them might be
Although-
able to conceive.
Although the numbers are decreasing. Yeah, the numbers are decreasing. Yes.
Well, yes, in every situation where women become educated,
That's right, absolutely. Even in the ultra-Orthodox communities, now I saw research that so long the women are more educated, the less number of children always all over the world, I know, yep.
So Palestinian women don't need to get a get.
What do you mean by that?
They can just get divorced without a get, right?
Okay, so I mean, how it has a connection to fertility treatment? No, Muslims, the law in Israel goes like this, that the religious law is the state law, and if you belong to the Jewish community, so you will be judged by rabbinic courts. If you belong to Muslim community, so you'll be judged by their courts, yes. If you're an atheist, good question, very good question, because there is no civil marriage in Israel. Oh, of course, no, I won't say that they are atheists, but they don't like the Jewish law of marriage and divorce, but they are forced by the religious, by the state to get married according to the religious law. That's the main problem, yes.
Palestinian Christians, of whom there are many.
What?
Where do they come? Palestinian Christians.
Yeah, according to their tradition. I mean, to their courts. I mean, in issues of marriage and divorce, only in issues in marriage and divorce, yes.
But they have to go to their own community, so you
Yeah.
know, an Episcopalian can't marry a Lutheran in Israel. Because you can only be married by your own religious authority.
So does a Greek Orthodox allow to marry Russian Orthodox in Israel?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know about that at all. Yeah.
Are there any final burning questions for Professor Irshai? Then I think we should thank her very much. For